G'day. This is my remote. Why is it backwards? Why is YouTube turned my right? Oh no, that's right. I wrote it backwards. No, I didn't. Anyway, thank you all for turning up to the stream. The audio will be crappy. Is there audio? Because I'm using the webcam mic, because for some reason YouTube won't let me use my good mic, and so I'm stuck with this echoey, awful audio, but bear with me. It's better than nothing, I hope. Anyway, why have I called you here today? Because how crappy is the audio? Is it acceptable? I don't know. Can someone tell me if the audio is? It's good. Okay, that's fine. Now we're going to look at this campaign we're going to wage. We've had a fantastic turnout, videos going up everywhere. I think the whole community has benefited from this. We've all seen a lot of new channels, a lot of really good videos, a lot of people pouring their heart out, making some really good points. It has got the whole community buzzing, and nothing we have done before has done that. I think this is the first time the community can see other members of the community all pulling together and producing what can only be described as a fantastic result. And I've spoken to people who don't normally watch FPV or drone videos, and they're finding these are turning up in their feeds. So it's getting pushed outside the echo chamber, which is really, really cool. But that's not all we're going to do. As I mentioned in my original video, this is a multi-stage process. Now, we have raised the profile of Remote ID on YouTube, but that's nowhere near enough, because although we've told the world, we've told each other exactly what it is or how Remote ID affects us, Joe Blow and Karen don't give a damn. They don't care about how Remote ID affects us. What they want to know is, how's it going to affect them? And the media will only be interested in stories that have a wide reach, which means we've got to tell them how Remote ID is going to affect them, the man in the street, everyday Joe. If it affects them, then it's a story. If it just affects a small community, media don't care. But we've created this groundswell, this presence, which has never been seen before on YouTube with this issue. And so now we've got to take the next step. And the next step is, I have been working on a video, it's not finished yet, still a bit of work to do, in which I am going to show the media and the public just how this Remote ID adversely affects them, affects the nation. In fact, it affects US security, because it empowers bad actors. It enables bad actors to do things they couldn't do otherwise, thanks to Remote ID. It really, really devastates the integrity of the aviation transport industry by making bad actors, or empowering bad actors, to shut down entire airports with a tiny little, according to the FAA, $50 device they can buy online. They've never had that power before. They've never been able to shut down an airport with just a $50 piece of electronics they can take to a baggage trolley or throw in the grass at the end of a runway. This is the first time. It's ridiculous. Then we have to point out the wider implications, because this is part of a growing surveillance society. Increasingly, everybody's being surveilled, watched, tracked. All their movements are being recorded. This is just another block in that growing wall of surveillance. And I think the public are growing increasingly tired of being always on, always being watched and followed and monitored and having everything logged. This is just another indication of how this is happening, especially to their kids. If their kids want to go and fly a drone, the government's going to be tracking them, logging them, surveilling them. That's not a good thing. Then we're going to look at it. I'm going to pitch that this is going to reduce the competitiveness of the US in terms of aviation, because it's going to be killing the flow of new talent. If children don't, and young people don't get involved in aviation because this Remote ID makes it too hard, too expensive, or too risky, then where are the next generation of engineers, pilots, designers? Where are they coming from? Where are the people who have built the US aviation and aerospace industry into what it is? Where are they going to come from? The US will lose the lead it has, because other countries are not holding back young people in the way the US is going to with Remote ID. So this also rolls over into jobs for your kids. The career opportunity for your kids is going to be severely constricted by the effects of Remote ID as it's currently made. So I'm doing a video to try and present this in a very concise form, aimed at the media, give them the bullet points, make their job easy. Reporters and so forth love it if you make their job easy. So I'll look at it from a reporter's perspective, from a journalist's perspective, giving them all the stuff they want, the bullet points, where to go to get expansion. And then I'm going to do the pitch to the general public, the person on the street. They may hate drones. They may think that we're the worst thing in the world, but they have to appreciate that what's happening to us will have dramatic fallout on them. They want to go for a holiday at Christmas? I'm sorry. Someone's decided to close the airport because they threw a $50 little electronic circuit board on the end of the runway, and now it's closed for a day while they try and find it. These things. So that's the next thrust. So your role in this will be to stand ready. Once the video is done, I will put it up unlisted, and I will probably put a post on my community page so that people can have a look at it and give me feedback, because this has to be dead right. We can't make mistakes with this. It has to be just right, not too long and not too rambly. So I may take a couple of iterations, because I tend to be a bit long and rambly. And then we will all, once we're happy with the video, everybody that has been involved in this will then contact their media, their local media, their national media, and say, hey, look at this. And if the TV stations and the newspapers get enough people emailing them with the same look at this, then they look at it. And if we've produced a convincing enough case, they will turn it into a story. It'll run on the national media, and people will suddenly realize, oh my God, after September, my airport could be closed at the drop of a hat just because the FAA and the government has decided to empower bad actors to do so with a tiny little circuit board that they can buy online. That's basically where we're going from here. So I've disclosed the next stage, and if there's any feedback, I shall look in the chat and see what you have to say. And Carbon Cage, good to see you here, mate. And Chris Quad FPV, Lambo drives Zambo, always here. Merry Christmas. Thank you, AP. I was waiting. It's only 6 months late. So tell me what you think. Is that sound like a sound way forward, the next phase of this thing, now that we've got this sort of massive profile and presence in the algorithm? When the media come looking, they will find all the stories. They'll see how many people are saying the same thing, basically. We're all saying the same thing in our own separate ways. As part of the video I send to the media, I may include some stuff from the videos people have posted, because some people have made some extremely good points. Some people have spoken from the heart, because they also need to see that this does affect what is basically a group of people who are not intent on spying on them, not like the government, not intent on disrupting them or whatever. Just people who have a hobby that they've flown for many, many years and are now being actively discriminated against. So that's the phase we take now. This is phase 2. There is a phase 3, which I'll disclose after we've done phase 2, depending on exactly what happens in the fallout of that, because I'm not finished yet. I'm chasing this right all the way through to the money. The money, if we can't get it through the media, we'll get it through the money. And we'll see how we get on there. And Australia is next. Yes, I did do a video showing that the request for comment is out in Australia, but I think they've already made their minds up. I think they've already decided. I mean, let's face it, FPV is virtually illegal in Australia, so you can guarantee that remote ID will be mandatory in a reasonable time frame. Interesting, in Canada, they've actually changed the rules a bit too. And it's very funny. I was on a stream yesterday talking about the Canadian situation. It's almost laughable what they're doing over there and the claims they're making for the changes. But at least they still have the no prescriptive rules for sub 250 grams, which is something every country should have. Right, anyone recap? You can wind the stream back, Heat Shield. That'll probably, not much in the first 5 minutes, but wind it back if you want it. Yeah, you're buggered there for sure, Carbon. Maybe, maybe not. Because if we can get this thing, if we can show the American people that the government has just created a massive vulnerability to the security and the future of the nation, then maybe, and this is the only way we'll get remote ID wound back, is if the politicians go, oh my God, we've made a giant mess of this, we better not do this before all this stuff happens and our airports are crippled, and maybe we should stop it, or at least pause it until we work out what we're going to do. So that's the goal. That's what I'd like to see happen. The politicians say to the FAA, stop this now. We have to go back to the drawing board, because it is not going to work in the way we intended it to. And if that happens, then Australia might learn from that and say, well, maybe this isn't such a good idea. And I noticed that in the Canadian new rules, there is not a mention of remote ID. It isn't mentioned. So the Canadians are a funny group. On one hand, they're very, very liberal with their sub 250 regulations, but with their 250 and over, they are ridiculous with maintenance logs and all that sort of stuff. They go overboard if it's 250 grams. But even they, with their massively overboard regulations requiring maintenance logs and all that sort of crap and so forth, they haven't suggested remote ID as the next phase of their regulatory framework. So we can point to them and say, if America doesn't need it, why does, or if Canada doesn't need it, why does America or Australia need it? Or New Zealand, because it's been mooted for New Zealand as well. And again, they don't know what they're doing. They've got no damn clues. So what happened when the CIA got to the field the other day, Bruce? Well, that's for another video, isn't it? You just have to watch and see. Actually, that video I did, L. Leston, it wasn't actually a CIA plane. It's all special effects. It's all I added the sign writing to the plane, and I did that for a reason. I do that quite often. Most of my videos have little Easter eggs in them where I've added something that wasn't really there or changed something. And the reason I do that is because I don't want any of the regulators thinking that they can have enough evidence in a video to prosecute someone, to fine them or to take them to court for an infringement of the rules. I want them to always be reminded that what you see isn't necessarily what happened. So you can't rely on video evidence. And if the FAA or CASA or CAA come along and say, we've got a video of you doing this, then you just turn around and say, well, special effects, go and look at this guy XJet's videos. Look, do you have an airplane with CAA enforcement on the side? You don't, do you? But there it is on video. So you can't believe everything you see. You got to keep working at this, Oh, thank you. Was it Errata Imagery? $10, great. And Steve Evans, a couple of bucks, excellent. If I fall asleep now, it's only because I've been working quite long hours. I hope people have seen that I've tried to go to every one of the videos and put a comment and a like, as I'm sure you all did, and tried to keep up with what's going on. So it's meant I'm getting up very early, going to bed very late, and because this is an existential threat that we have with this remote ID. We really do need to put everything we've got into it. So I'm putting everything I've got into it. And I'm glad to see so many other people have joined in and pitched into the whole thing. If this does nothing else, it has unified the community in a way that nothing else has. And it has made the community, we've got more contact with the rest of the community. It's brilliant. It is, we can write letters to senators. We can rely on the AMA to represent a change in weight level, which they haven't. In fact, interesting, I watched the AMA stream the other day. They have their annual meeting thing. It was so telling. For a start, it was a sea of grey hair. The AMA is a sea of grey hair, or bald heads. I'm grey and bald, but I know there are a lot of younger people involved in what we do. But the AMA, it just looks like it's all old people, all basically waiting for God. And I listened very carefully to what was said. Oh, thanks, Stephen Evans. Excellent, thank you. I listened to what was said, and they talked at length about members, about donations, about something they've got called the foundation, which is you can give money to it. And the phrase "the hobby" was mentioned only once in an almost hour-long stream. They mentioned the hobby, the greater hobby, just once, which kind of shows that the AMA is all about the AMA. It's not about the hobby anymore. It used to be about the hobby, not anymore. It's now just about what's best for the AMA. And we saw that because they promised they would be supporting this, shifting the threshold to registration to 1 kilo. And I think when the FPV Freedom Coalition questioned them about, they said, well, we're not going to ask our members to mail their senators just yet. We're waiting for the authorization bill draft to be published, and then we'll do it. And then the authorization bill was published, and they told their members to go and write about these things, being able to grant freers themselves, a higher altitude limit, but nothing to do with the weight limit. They just lied. They said, we'll support you, and then they didn't. You can't trust them because they don't want the weight limit raised for obvious reasons, because more people can fly without having to have a freer. So there's less necessity to have membership. And they're also saying they want the right to issue their own freers, which you can see where that would go. Another reason to be a member of the AMA. They just want as many members as they can. It's very obvious in that meeting that money plays a huge role in what the AMA does, how it focuses and so forth. They're as bad as Google almost, I believe. Such a shame for the people who have been proud AMA members for many years. And I noticed that some of the people making videos to support the remote ID pushback are or were AMA members who have basically given up on them. And fair enough. That's sad but true. What else have we got? Have a list of, I'm doing a playlist of all these the videos that I found. And so if I haven't put a comment on your video and you've made one, then drop me a line, let me know so I can include it in the playlist, and we'll have the whole playlist there, which is it's really good for the media and for anyone else that wants to see what's going on. And Wheats didn't renew his AMA. I can understand why. What are you going to get for it? Because we don't even know whether there's going to be enough freers for the AMA, let alone the rest. As I've said in other places, there are 115,000 educational institutions in the USA and just over 2,000 AMA sites. How are 4,000 freers going to meet that demand? Someone's going to miss out, aren't they? So is it your kid's going to miss out because their school or their doesn't get a freer? As I said, we need to push through to the public that this is going to affect their kids, their job opportunities, their learning opportunities. And that's something that the public will relate to. You know, they don't care if you and I can't have fun in a field somewhere, but they will be concerned if their kids' options for employment and career paths are being needlessly destroyed by a piece of regulation that also effectively cripples the aviation industry. And what else have we got? I see Bot Grinders in the chat. Thank you, man. Can always rely on Bot Grinder. We need an audience of hundreds of thousands. Yes, well, that's where the media comes in. The mainstream media will give us the audience we need to push this out further. And so that's why this is a multi-stage strategy we're working with. Don't be evil. Yes, Mr. Google, eh? Yeah, Bot Grinder's having a night off, by the way, if you're missing his stream, because he's been working hard. I will be watching the video. It drops tomorrow at noon, though, because I like all his videos. Excellent. And the other thing I'm going to push at some stage too is the health effect of this thing. I'm trying to get to put the goggles on someone who is not fully able, like a paraplegic, you know, someone in a wheelchair, and give them their first FPV experience and include that in video, because I think that will open a lot of eyes. The way that people, I'm sure we've all seen that bit of footage that just came out recently of a chimpanzee that was raised in a lab, and it was shown outdoors for the first time, and it looked up at the sky, and it was wow. That was quite an interesting piece of footage. A lot of people have spoken to me and said, have you seen that? That sort of thing really captures people's minds. So if we can show somebody who's confined to a wheelchair suddenly experiencing the freedom of FPV, I think that will be a really poignant moment in any video. And that's what we need to do. Capture minds, capture hearts. That's one thing to do. You know, this has, as I say, this video has to be perfect. I only get one chance to make this impression. So I've been working very long hours on it, and it's still a few days off, and I will be doing a pre-launch and getting feedback before we throw it at the media. So, and of course, anyone with ideas, please let me know, because I have a lot of ideas, but I don't have them all. And watching the videos that people have put up has given me an immense amount of extra information, extra perspective that I will be using, because there's been some really good videos. What else? Oh, thank you. Was it R1MS, R1M.S? 20 bucks. Thank you so much. What else is in here? There's nothing that will be achieved from all this noise, Dr. Quads. Are you sure? Only time will tell. But as I say, I mean, I'm the first one to concede that this is an idea. There's no guarantees it will work. But so far, I think it's been worth the effort for the benefit the community has got from it. You know, we've all benefited from these videos and seeing other people and subscribing to cool new channels. That alone was worth the effort, trust me. Yeah, the STEM damage is amazing, and this is what annoys me about the FAA, because they pay lip service to STEM on so many occasions. You know, we're backing STEM, blah blah blah, but we're going to pull the carpet out from under it, because we're only going to give 4,000 freers to the AMA and the 115,000 educational institutions in America. So I'm sorry, but how does that work? Thank you, Gary. Much appreciated, mate. What have we got? Does RID require a phone to set up or monitor? Because I don't own one. You don't have to, I don't think you have to set it up with a phone. You should come with the module should come with a little piece of paper which has the serial number, which you then use in your registration. But yeah, and remember, of course, I will be doing a video if this whole RID thing goes ahead. I'll be doing a video on how to properly install your remote ID module, which includes wrapping with at least 7 layers of aluminum foil, aluminum tape. You know, the body tape. Wrap it against the arm, hard against carbon, with several layers of aluminum body tape for maximum performance. No one says, no, there's nothing that's, it just says the remote ID module must work. It doesn't say the installation has to be good enough for it to work over any distance. So you can still be compliant without being compliant, if you know what I mean. But that's just in case, it's a worst case scenario. Hopefully we won't have to get to that level. Oh yes, Dr. Quads. I won't accept your help. No, I haven't had a chance to go through that in depth yet, but we're not that far down the track, mate. So I will get back to you on that. You wouldn't believe how much email is sitting waiting to be read in my mailbox. It is quite significant. Thank you, Lewis. Much appreciated, mate. Yes, yes. Aluminum foil, keep it on your head at all times. Protect you from the satellites. That's what you do. Yes, FPV is run by selfish bullies. You're probably right. We're all selfish bullies. And that's not unreasonable because everybody's selfish. That's the nature of people. We just like to share as well. We're selfish sharers. Faraday, yeah, exactly. I suppose it becomes a Faraday cage. If you do that, the aluminum foil or aluminum tape, you'll get very little range from your remote ID. But if you are asked, is it compliant, you can undo the foil and say, look, there it is, fully protected by this aluminum body tape so it doesn't get damaged. Not my fault if it doesn't work properly. It's on the approved list. And also, the benefit of that is if you do have your phone and you're right by the drone, it will show up. It'll reduce the range. You won't eliminate it, but it'll reduce it. So you can say, I checked before I took off. Look, it's on my phone. It wasn't on your phone from 100 feet away. Not my problem. Get your phone checked. Yeah, and Bashed or Broken makes some really valid points. I don't think it needs to be put on giant scale planes, though, because they're not going to be flown in places where Karens are going to be, they're going to be flown at fields, flying fields where you'd expect to see them. But again, this whole thing about if we can't get it thrown out, let's get it turned around so that we have the same situation as we do for ADSB, where it's required in some areas, mandatory, but other areas, it's optional. If people want to put it on, fine, but you don't have to have it if you're flying on your own property in the middle of nowhere. That's ridiculous. And I'd like to see the case for demanding remote ID be used in places where it will not fulfill the goals that have been set for it. That's a silly rule. Spoofing the signals. It's interesting. I've spoken to a number of people on the idea of spoofing, and some say it could be illegal. Some say it's not. I tend to think that it's not illegal because it's broadcast on an ISM band, which is basically a free-for-all band. There's no license requirements, and it's a band which says if you're using this band, you must accept that you could get interference, but you must try not to produce interference. Now, a legitimate, that is to say, a properly formed remote ID packet is not interference. It's a remote ID packet. The fact that the data in it may be invalid doesn't change the fact it is a valid remote ID packet. At a packet level, it's totally valid. So I don't think that spoofing is a form of interference. It's simply not. It doesn't interfere with the other valid packets that are going from drones with remote ID fitted. So it's not interfering. It is just providing spurious data. And because the thing says you must accept, that the band will not always deliver what you want it to, I think they have to sit on that side of things. So yeah, as long as you don't interfere with transmissions, other legal transmissions, you can make all the transmissions you want. That's what I believe. So the courts would probably decide that ultimately, but I'd be prepared to take that battle on. What have we got now? Thing is, Hazard, you're supposed to make sure that it's operative before you fly. If you take off knowing your remote ID isn't working, you're in breach of the rule. And the remote ID actually is supposed to be self-diagnostic and report if it's not working. I don't see how it can report it's not working if the power's disconnected, because it's just going to sit there, isn't it? So who knows? Who knows? Yeah. Will the FAA be held responsible when a child is attacked in a park because their model is tracked by the public? The government usually indemnifies itself against that sort of thing. But the beauty of all the videos that have been posted, and many of them have said, this represents a risk to me, the drone operator. Someone could come and rob me or attack me. So the FAA cannot say, we were unaware of this risk, because it has been clearly pointed out, time-stamped on YouTube, you can't fake that. So if someone does get hurt or robbed or worse, then we as a community can go to the courts and say, the FAA knew about this. We told them, and it was publicly published on YouTube that this was a risk, and the FAA's response was call 911. Which is an unreasonable response, because if someone's stolen your smartphone and you're laying there in a pool of blood, 3 minutes away from death, how do you do that? It's not very practical. So I think there will be a case. I think someone will take the FAA to court, but ultimately I think because they've been so smart, they've used this. It's not about safety, it's about national security. And we've seen that national security, well, that's a get out of jail free card for all government departments. If you're securing the nation, you can do whatever the hell you like. I mean, look at the revelations of Ed Snowden. The NSA was not supposed to spy on US citizens, not supposed to monitor US citizens, but he proved that they were. But national security, we won't worry about it because it's national security. We know people have broken the law and things, but we'll give them a get out of jail free card because they were just protecting the nation. No one went to jail. Well, they want to put Ed Snowden in jail, but none of the people actually responsible for spying on Americans has gone to jail. No one's lost their job, nothing, because the government looks after its own. And that's always the way it is. We just have to acknowledge that. Thank you. Oh, more from Iradia Imagery. My goodness, if I stay here all night, I'll be rich. Yes, aluminum. I say aluminum because I'm talking primarily to American audience, and that's what you say. When I talk to my friends in New Zealand, I say aluminium. And thank you, was it Tantric FPV, $5? Thank you so much. These donations, actually, I really appreciate them more than you might know, because I've discovered in the past month that advertisers aren't interested in putting ads on videos about remote ID. You know, if you put a video up about how to invest your money and how I became a millionaire in 5 days, you get paid about $20 for every 1,000 views. It's an amazing amount of money. When you put a video up about something as esoteric and as remote ID that nobody cares about and nobody understands, advertisers go, don't know about it, don't want to know, and you're the bottom of the bin. You get the ads only if there's no other videos running that are even remotely better. So my ad revenues are quite low this month. I expected that. That's a hit I take. I'm not complaining about it. I knew it would happen, but it does mean that when people donate through here, makes a hell of a difference to paying the bills, and that's great. I appreciate that. So what do we got? Where can you buy 1,000 cheap rids? Well, I mean, as I said, if you've got the right type of phone, you can just put an app on your phone, walk through the airport for you. And the beauty of it is that they won't be able to find you because the remote ID's telling them that there are drones at the end of the runway. It doesn't tell them where you are, because if you've got the app set up properly, it'll tell them that you're standing at the end of the runway. So that's where they go looking. You'll be just walking around the foyer. It doesn't matter. And you can pick up really cheap smartphones these days, although most of them won't have Bluetooth 5, which you need to do that. But and thank you, Lambo. Much appreciated, mate. And Johnny D. Ooh, great guys. Great guys. Let's see here. Yeah, manufacturers will feel the hurt. It's unfortunate that we got a good backing for the RDQ lawsuit, which I felt unfortunately was never going to succeed. Again, national security, and I think manufacturers have sort of resigned themselves to the fact that what will happen will happen, and I haven't seen a lot of. I'm so pleased the community's got behind this, because there's been very little support elsewhere. I understand a lot of the other high-profile YouTubers, they want to stand back a bit and remain out of the fray. They don't want to be seen to be involved in this, and for whatever reason. But the problem is it affects everybody. If this all comes through, and the hobby's already in decline. I mean, I search for RC plane on YouTube every day as I produce videos showing that, and now all you get are toy videos and 5 top drones and things. It used to be video after video, people flying model aircraft and drones and things. It's just not there anymore. The hobby is partly going underground, but it's also just so many people have emailed me since this campaign started saying, "Oh, I'm selling up, I'm giving up, I'm hanging up my drones, hanging up my models. It's just can't be bothered." And that's sad. That's tragic, because I know that all the other influencers are seeing a decline in revenues through YouTube, and they'll see a decline in revenues through affiliate links as well, because if people aren't buying and building and flying this stuff, they're not going to watch the videos. The money won't be there, so everyone will be out of a job, and it'll always be someone else's fault, I suspect. Yeah, Mike, it is a disappointment to see the bigger YouTubers not addressing this. But as I say, I understand everyone's got their right to their position and their point, and I can understand that they want to look out for themselves and feed their families and things, and perhaps they feel that getting involved might jeopardize that because there may be some pushback. I don't know, but that's a personal position. I'm privileged. I'm very privileged. I only have my wife and myself to support, and I can. I'm not selling stuff through affiliate links. I can call it like it is. I can be militant. I can go out there and do things a lot of people don't have the luxury of doing because of their commitments and other things. So I don't condemn people for not getting involved, but I am disappointed. Is remote ID required for drones under 250 grams? Yes, if you're using them for Part 107 operations. So if there's a storm, and perhaps you think there's a tile dislodged on your roof, and you decide, I'll go up and check with one of these, then you will need remote ID and your Part 107 certification, according to the FAA. Seriously, for something like that. I don't understand. There you go for size. But that's it. And this has really shown the disconnect that the FAA has with the community, and the fact that they do not wish to consult with us, because they've thrown us off all the consultative committees. No recreational representation. And that's one good thing about Canada. They have just made room for recreational representation on a lot of their committees they're going to be using for rulemaking. And that's brilliant. They've finally woken up to the fact that we better get the recreational users on board, probably after the MAAC fiasco. We better get them on board and help us create rules that are going to be usable. Whereas the FAA said, we don't care, you guys are a nuisance, get out of it. We're going to talk to our friends at Boeing and Google and Amazon, and their wallets are bigger than yours. What's absolutely not true, Lon? Tell me, what is incorrect? Yeah, the Mini 3, yes, it's I spoke with DJI and they said that the Mini 3, the sub 250, 249 gram version will still broadcast remote ID. And I challenged them, why? It's not a legal requirement. And they said, but some users may want to use them for Part 107 work, so they'll need remote ID. And I said, well, why don't you make a recreational version that doesn't have remote ID? And then they stopped talking to me. Because to be honest, someone could buy this and put something on it that made it 251 grams, they could buy this and then want to use it for Part 107, but doesn't have remote ID. So why should DJI have to have remote ID? It's the responsibility of the user to make sure that the product is remote ID compliant. If it's under 250 grams and it's being used for Part 107. Now let's have a look. Did I miss Lon's response? Here we go. That the FAA will find you for looking at it. I'm sorry, Lon. I put a video up showing Kevin Morris from the FAA telling us exactly that that would be considered not to be recreational. It would require a Part 107 certification to look at your own roof after a storm. He said it. Go look back through my videos. You'll find it. It's there. He actually said it. And if you can't believe Kevin, who is their drone spokesman, Mr. Drone, who can you believe? Because the FAA, they would not lie to us, would they? I don't know. So, yeah. That comment about looking at roofs. Yeah, but Kevin Morris is full of crap. I don't know why they have him speaking on these things. He has made so many misrepresentations. And it speaks to the fact that the FAA sort of hold us in contempt. They don't care if Kevin's out there spreading bullshit. They don't care. We're just recreational users. We've got no power. We've got no clout. We've got no influence anymore. We just don't count. We're perhaps a revenue source if they can catch us flying without remote ID after the 16th. But a regulator, and remember why they were going to put registration in, so they could keep us informed. You know, when you're registered, we can inform you and keep you up to date. Well, they're going to spread bullshit like Kevin spreads. Then I'm sorry, they're failing dismally. And what's the point in registration? Kevin doesn't. I've tried to get Kevin on another stream, which I'm on. He was invited to come along and discuss these things. He refused. Wouldn't come on. Wouldn't speak to me. Wouldn't engage with me. I don't know why. Perhaps it's because I've got an army of video clips here that I would show him and say, this is wrong, Kevin. Why did you say it? Kevin, why did you misinform the public? Kevin, why do you even represent the FAA if you don't know what the hell you're talking about on so many occasions? I mean, you've got to hold these people's feet to the flames. They have to be held to it. They're paid very good money to do this. And if they can't do it, they should either not do it or they should put someone in there who does know what they're doing. It doesn't happen. Let's see. You can't guess why he wouldn't come on. Yeah, and that again, I'm actually going to do a video and I'm going to invite the regulators of the world to establish a dialogue with me, because I think I speak for a tiny, tiny percentage of the community, but it's a very vocal part of the community. And I think it needs to be acknowledged that we exist. And if the regulators want to produce rules and regulations that are going to get compliance, they need to speak to us. And the FAA can't just say, no, we're kicking you off so that Google and Wing and Boeing and Airbus can have seats on these boards. They can't do that. They've got to listen to the community, or this is not going to work for them. And I'm happy to put myself forward to represent not everybody, because I know there are people that won't want me to speak to them, but for those who do want me to speak to them, I would be more than happy to engage with these people and try and help them come up with ideas and implementations that extend safety, extend security, but don't cripple the hobby needlessly. I mean, rules have to be proportional to risk. And at the moment, that is far from a fact. You know, the fact that we are so much more regulated than ultralights, yet ultralights kill people every year and we don't, that's hard to understand. McAllister RC, good evening. It's actually afternoon here. What's the time? It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon here, 2:04. And No, in Canada, no remote ID. No, not even talk of it. No talk. And they've just gone through this process and rolled out a whole lot of new rules, which will be good for the next 5 years or so. So it's not in the foreseeable future for Canada. They're smart enough to realize it would actually be more of a liability than an asset from a security perspective. Because Canada, so that's such a strange place, Canada. They have some really good rules and then they have some completely lunatic ones. Sometimes they're smart. Why bother to have prescriptive rules for sub 250 gram craft? Because the intrinsic risk is so damn low. You can fly BVLOS with sub 250. You can fly as far as it'll go. You don't need a waiver or a special anything like that. No, don't need any of that because you're not going to hurt anybody. So they're quite clever in that regard. But then they come out with some really lame stuff. But they have seen that remote ID serves no good purpose. Right. And First Survivor says, yes, talk of red in Canada. Where was that? I was talking to Don from Don Drones On or whatever it is, and he was saying that he could find no reference to remote ID. So if you've got something, then let me know. Yeah, bashed or broken, that's probably, I can quite understand that. The risk for children is getting too high now with this hobby. It's an unacceptable level of risk. I have got some nice footage from early AMA nationals, which I'm going to put in, which is all young people. They're all young people enjoying the hobby of model aircraft, sponsored by a major US car company. A US car company sponsored the American model nationals. Such a, mum and apple pie hobby, fantastic. Why is it now so vilified and restricted and restrained? We haven't changed. The hobby hasn't changed. And the other thing that we'll be getting across too is that the public, when they think of drones, they only think of this, quadcopters. They only think of quadcopters. But you've got to remember, our hobby has got a lot of people who fly wings, we fly line of sight, scale models, and the public are unaware that they are also considered drones. They don't realize that, thank you, Jim. They don't realize that as far as the FAA is concerned, a drone is anything that flies and is remotely controlled. So those traditional old nitro trainers and the foam piper cover, the public need to be informed that these are also now considered drones and a threat to the national security. Seriously, you're going to tell me that my discus launch glider, my 260 gram discus launch glider that is thrown by a 70-year-old man needs to have remote ID because it represents a threat to US national security? I don't think that is a sustainable argument anywhere. But that's what the FAA claim. Yeah, private land and air ownership, that's an interesting one. I know there's the Cosby case, and it's a lot of interpretation. I think the thing is that the FAA uses national airspace when they should actually say navigable airspace. Airspace you cannot fly an aircraft in. Why do they need control of that? If there's not going to be any manned aircraft in there, why do they need control? And the problem now is that, of course, with the arrival of unmanned aircraft, that becomes navigable. You can fly a drone under the tree. So therefore, they're going to say, well, that's now navigable airspace. So therefore, we have control of it. And I can't see why the US hasn't granted shielded operations like New Zealand has. I mean, it makes a lot of the problems go away. But no, there's this constant race between regulators to be best, have the best regulations, to lead the world in regulatory reform. And that's why they never really look at other countries and adopt their rules unless they're bad ones. They don't seem to look at it and say, well, New Zealand's got the shielded operations. That's brilliant. We could do that, and it'd make it easier for everybody. But no, we didn't think of it, so it's not any good. It's terrible. How close am I to finishing the ADS-B tracker? I'm very close, but obviously I've been a bit sidetracked recently. I'm now just tidying up some bits on the phone app, which also means some bits on the modulars on the ADS-B unit itself as well. So yeah, I'm hoping once we've got the second phase out of the way, I'll be taking a break because it'll be just waiting for things to happen, and I'll hopefully get it all sorted out then, because that is an important component. I'd like to also point out, and in fact, when I do the video, I'll point out that we are so safety focused that we are taking an initiative and we are doing things that now rely on manned aviation to make the changes to keep the skies safe. And if they're not going to do that, the FAA cannot complain that we're not doing our bit and that we need to change, because now with an ADS-B alarm, it's entirely up to manned aviation to have a transmitter that we can pick up and make sure that we're out of their way. when they're flying illegally, which they often do. Do I think people will actually get fined for not complying with RID? That's going to be very interesting, because the FAA previously just didn't have the enforcement to go after people. As we've seen, they like to make examples of people like Philly Drone Life. They'll throw $175,000 of possible fines against them, so that it gets in the media and people go, "Ooh, I should be careful." That's the way they work, and they have this other policy that they prefer to educate before they take, legal action. But now they're throwing it to law enforcement. There's been a number of videos put out focused or aimed at law enforcement officers, how you can do things with these new regulations with remote ID, what you should be doing. So I'm thinking that if it's put down to local law enforcement, if they've got a quiet day and they feel like hassling a few people and maybe they want to make meet their quota for fines and things, they may go out, chasing people and trying to hunt you down. I don't know. I don't live in the States, so I'm not sure. I know in New Zealand, some of that actually happens with traffic policing. The government constantly denies there are any quotas, but I've spoken to people who are cops, and they say, yeah, we got quotas. We're going to meet a certain figure every month, or, in our review, we get, spoken to. So, if those quotas are put on local police, local police have got the ability to go out there and enforce those rules and issue fines, whatever, then, you will probably see reasonable levels of enforcement. And Lon says, what's he say? That's not your own roof. Yeah. I think you'll find that Kevin was talking about your own roof. Go and have a look at the video. Go and look at the video if you don't believe me. What have we got? Parts list for the ADSB tracker. Yes, I've just held off at the moment because I want to see if I've got I haven't got it here, the Raspberry Pi Zero 2W, which is a much smaller, cheaper, more power efficient board. And if I can get it going on that, because it's only like $15 or something, or it was only about $15. And I've just got to finish some of the C code on that. If I can do that, that'd be the best option. It makes the whole thing far more convenient. But and also I'm just looking for an amplifier on AliExpress, because the one that I've got is home built, and it's nice if you can just buy a module off the shelf for the audio side of things. So those are a couple of little bits and pieces. But I'll do a parts list of the major parts fairly shortly, which is the SDR dongle and the little voltage regulator, and you can use a Raspberry Pi 4. So, right. If you can, actually, the supply of Raspberry Pi 4s has improved immensely. I had a call from a guy from Australia day before yesterday saying that Raspberry Pi 4s are now available, and should he buy one for the ADSB alarm. So yeah, they're becoming, and the Raspberry Pi Foundation promised that the supply chain would free up in the third quarter of this year, which is now. Well, it is New Zealand. You guys are still in June, aren't you? You're so far behind in America. Well, it's already July here. It's already July the 1st. What have we got now? Yeah, I agree. GPS is probably one of the deciding factors for whether something represents a hobby product, hobby craft, or whether it represents a craft that is going to be able to be used by someone with less skill training and interest in the hobby. So, yeah, I don't want to sideline camera drone operators, because this is the thing. People say, oh, it was all the camera drone operators, it's all their fault. But when you look at it, there are probably, 1 million camera drones in the USA at least? And how many incidents do we have on a weekly basis? There's virtually none now. There were quite a few initially when people didn't know, but, we see maybe 1 or 2 a week maximum out of 1 million camera drone operators. That's better than manned aviation. The number of incidents reported against manned aviators is greater per head of population of those communities than it is for drone operators. Camera drone operators are generally even better behaved than manned aviators. Yet for some reason we vilify it, we've got to, there'll always be bad apples. We catch people speeding on the freeways and drinking and driving, but we don't think, oh, everybody who drives is a bad person because somebody drank and drive or somebody sped. We don't. So we shouldn't have the same attitude to people that fly camera drones. I mean, I don't have a camera drone. I don't, because it's not something that interests me. And also, the best camera drones are DJI, and I wouldn't buy it because you never buy a DJI drone. You never own a DJI drone. You just are allowed to use it when they say it's okay to. If I want to fly at my airfield with the FPV drone, the DJI FPV drone, too bad. It's an airfield. You can't fly there. They don't care that I have legal permission to fly there. As far as they're concerned, it's an airfield. You cannot fly there. And so, Yeah. And I don't have a smartphone that's connected to the cellular network because I choose not to. Because some people have also said this being tracking, it's no different to your smartphone. It tracks you everywhere. And so why do you care if your drone's being tracked? And to that, I would say I have the choice of whether I carry a smartphone. I can go, but in fact, I have. If I can get it out of my pocket. Here's my phone. Look, it is. It's not smart. It's really dumb. It's an old flip phone. It doesn't have any internet connectivity or anything. So I have SMS and I have voice messages. I carry it with me. They don't track me in the same way they might track someone with a smartphone that's got a GPS in it. So I made the choice. I want to be connected to the world, but I will give up internet connectivity for my privacy. But you don't have that option if you're flying with remote ID, do you? With remote ID, you can't say, I don't want people to track my drone because you've got remote ID. So it takes away the choice. What else have we got? Yep, Lambo, it's a flip phone, mate. It's not one of those fancy foldy LCD ones. It's just an old-fashioned one. Half the buttons don't work anymore. It's just about completely stuffed. So I think it takes a full-size SIM card. It's that bad. So, it doesn't do the 5G, so I won't get brain cancer. Isn't that good? Isn't that what they tell me? If it did 5G, I'd burn it down, wouldn't I? Is that what you do with 5G, apparently? Anyway, I always wear my tinfoil hat when I use my phone, just in case. Right. I do have a smartphone. It's similar pack, and I use it for setting up cameras, and I use it as a tablet basically. And it uses Wi-Fi as well. I can use it with Wi-Fi, so that's fine. But if I'm out in the middle of a field somewhere, I have no way of contacting DJI to unlock my drone if I'm at the airfield. How you can do that? I don't have, unless they're willing to take a phone call, which I'm not going to spend that money. Makes my DJI drones useless to me. Given that we have a helipad just across the way and an airport, the entire town is within 4 kilometres of an airfield, which means, legally speaking, unless you are flying a shielded operation, you can't fly a drone. But DJI doesn't know about shielded operations. They don't take that into account. So Casey, yes, I'm right behind you, man. We will do what we can. That's all we can do. The only fight that is truly lost is the one that you just couldn't be bothered waging. And I see far too many people who just can't be bothered, unfortunately. I set my smartphone. You mean this with no internet connectivity? How do I do that? And my other smartphone doesn't have a SIM card, so there's no internet connectivity either, except unless I'm using Wi-Fi. So yeah. Good on you, the rattlesnake, commenting and liking all those videos. It's been, yeah, I've tried to get out there and get to all of them, but I'm sure I've missed some. But I'll go through because I will put them all to a playlist. If I'm gonna tell people to do something, I've got to play my part. I got to make sure I'm doing my bit. I'm not going to say do this while I do nothing. I mean, I've got to lead by example. I wish more of the government departments and the people out there would do as they say. Do as they say, not just as ask other people to do it. And there's John. G'day, John. How's it going, mate? Do you have to activate it with DJI before you use those? Yeah. The 03 is still like the original one. It doesn't do any talking back to China that we know of because it doesn't require a smartphone to run or anything. Yeah, the interesting thing, we're talking about surveillance and the app, the Karen app. I'm pretty sure that we will see versions of the Karen app released, free versions, which as soon as you pull it out and operate it and it sees a drone, that data will then be sent back via the cellular network to one of these surveillance networks. So they won't have to have all these receiving nodes all over the country because everyone with a cell phone that's running the app becomes part of their network. And that's how surveillance works covertly. And they probably won't even tell you that it's sending the data back. So every time you use that app, you're putting money in their pockets effectively because that database is worth money. What are my thoughts on flight controls versus another tech that may be affected by this? Well, it's interesting because if you're flying freestyle and you don't have a GPS on your drone, then it doesn't matter what happens to the flight controller. It's not going to report your location because it doesn't know where you are. And the only drone I have with GPS is my long range, this Aura 7 from Foxtech. That's the only one that's got a GPS on it. All my other freestyle drones, I don't use GPS rescue or anything like that. I don't have a GPS. It's just another thing. And this is the other problem. How many times have people gone to go flying and the GPS won't get enough satellites within a reasonable time? You know, you might have to sit for sometimes 3 or 4, 5 minutes. Just depends on where you are and how outdated the almanac and the GPS is. How many people are going to want to sit there for 4 or 5, maybe 6 minutes while their remote ID module gets enough satellites for it to blink and say it's functional? Because you're not allowed to take off until it blinks and says it's functional. So how many people are going to do that? Add 5 minutes to that waiting time. I don't think that's practical. I don't think you should ask people to do that. But that's to be legally compliant, you will have to wait until the broadcast remote ID module indicates that it has a solid GPS lock. Yes, the hobby is much safer now, and that's why the FAA shifted away from safety to security as their rationale for all this rollout of ridiculous restriction. There's nothing to stop you taking off before it gets a thing, but you will be in breach of the rule. You will be in breach of the rule, which means that if, and remember, it does have to report the takeoff position. It can't report your pilot position, but the remote ID, broadcast remote ID, has to report the takeoff position and the position of the quad. So if it takes off and doesn't get a lock until it's flying around, it can't report the takeoff position. And in theory, a law enforcement officer could say, you took off before you were supposed to, and here's a fine because you now have breached the remote ID rule because your craft was not compliant. And remember, with broadcast remote ID, the burden is on the operator to make sure that the craft is compliant. With the standard remote ID, it's up to the manufacturer to make sure that the remote ID is built in and can't be tampered or turned off. But with a broadcast remote ID module, it's you, the pilot, that bears the responsibility of making sure that module's working properly at all times. So, yeah. No, it's quads. It'll report the location of the drone as soon as it gets a lock, but it doesn't know where you took off from because you took off before it had the information. So it still wouldn't be a valid packet because there'd been an invalid takeoff point. And that's why you'd not be compliant if you took off before it locked. Yeah. Yeah, most times you get things really fast, but there are times when, especially if you're flying somewhere else and you're moving quite a few miles away from where you usually fly, it has to update its almanac and things, and it can take a few minutes to get a lock. Or if you haven't flown that particular quad for, maybe a couple of months, then it's going to take a long time to get a lock. The interesting thing is flying bandos, actually, and flying freestyle, because when the quad's upside down, it's probably going to lose GPS lock. If you're doing flips and rolls and you're doing inverted yaw spins, you're not going to have a GPS lock while it's upside down and spinning. So if someone pulls their phone out at that time, suddenly your drone is no longer remote ID compliant because it doesn't show up. The position is not being updated on the app. It's a long stretch, but in theory, if you're flying out of a bando, it's got to regain lock. And even if you're flying, this is going to be tricky because people that fly in urban locations with what they call GPS canyons, where you've got tall buildings, or you're flying in a ravine or something, you may not get a GPS lock, because the GPS satellites are either not visible or there's too much bouncing off the walls to get a solid lock. In that case, under the rule, you're not allowed to take off. So, crazy times. Yes, gliders, I can't see why we need to run gliders. Gliders just don't have and I'm talking about pure gliders, not ones with motors on the front. The gliders just don't have any way effectively of threatening anybody. Any way, shape or form, not even a security thing. There's no way that a discus launch glider could pose a security threat to anybody, certainly when I throw them. I'm lucky to get, out of my hand, let alone any distance. Right, how many people we got? 187, that's excellent. That's brilliant. Oh, and 145 have given a thumbs up. I really appreciate that. It's fantastic, guys. And as I say, I just totally appreciate all the support. In fact, the whole community appreciates all the support that every single individual has given in this initiative. And I noticed that the likes of the FPV Freedom Coalition have been very reserved in endorsing this campaign. But as I say, everybody has got their position on this. And it's a bit of a good cop, bad cop thing. I mean, like the FPV Freedom Coalition is trying hard to work with the FAA, despite the futility of that. And they have to be there just in case the FAA turn around and say, oh, we've decided to talk to you and listen to what you say this time. We don't want to burn those bridges. So I understand Dave Messinas and Dan Oakes and and their position on this. It'd be nice if they did cross over, but I'm not going to criticise them for taking the position they do, because, as I say, we've got to have every iron in the fire, and that includes the consultative process that the FPVFC are going through. Completely disagree with XJet, and he with me. Yeah, well, excellent. That's great, because we've got to. I mean, I stand up here and talk a lot and make a lot of noise, but I'm one thing I learned many years ago is I'm not always right. Absolutely not always right. And the moment you stop looking and listening to other people who have contrary points of view, you might as well hang up your clogs, because you're not going to learn anything. And the best thing about being alive is learning new stuff. And over the years, there's been many times when I've changed my position because I've realized that someone else's position, and they give me the information or the data, and I think, actually, that's really valid, and maybe I was incorrect. And you say, right, I've changed my mind. And I'm always prepared to change my mind when people come with a convincing argument and evidence. I'm never, it's like, I don't get into fanboyism. Some people are fanboys. Oh, this is the best because I've got one or whatever. And I'm not going to listen to anyone that says anything bad. That you only disadvantage yourself when you do that. Everyone should listen to everybody's point of view, and at the very least, just respect that point of view. And sometimes you have to agree to disagree, but that's what grown-ups do. That's what we do. And the beauty is, I've seen a few videos that have been sort of contrary, and I've thanked the people for putting them up, because every video with remote ID in the title is added to this groundswell, this push on the algorithm, and got our message a little bit further outside the echo chamber. So even if you totally disagree, put your video up, because it helps, helps the cause. Where am I? In New Zealand. Yeah, we're on Flight Simulator, but unfortunately the tower you see on Flight Simulator has gone. The mayor has had it knocked down. There's the tower. Interestingly enough, now there's a big furor in the local government here, because that mayor spent so much money that they're having to put up the local taxes by nearly 20% this year, and people are not happy. And one of the reasons is that instead of accepting my offer to buy that tower and fully restore it at no cost to the local people, she spent $7,000 to have it knocked down. That's the sort of thing that's got this town into such big trouble financially. And so those chickens are coming back to roost, and I'll be making a video when I get time about the situation here locally for the local residents, to show them just how much of their money has been squandered by a mayor with no social conscience. Well, there you go. I've got a letter here somewhere that cost her $2,000, and demanding that I take down a video in which I proved she was a liar, because she was going to sue me for defamation. And I said to her, go ahead, bring it on. The video is still up, and I've heard nothing else, which kind of speaks to the weakness of her allegations. But you get that, I'm used to dealing with these people, and I stand my ground, and they inevitably back down, because I make sure I've got my ducks in a row. I like to make sure I get everything right, which is why we're doing this in a very carefully programmed and strategic fashion. Thank you, Ghost Rider FPV. I've seen the damage done to a helicopter from a Phantom 4. The idea is impossible for a drone to cause helicopter accident. Yeah, I mean, how many people have died? And if we look at it, who is the worst offender in crashing drones into aircraft? Well, it actually happens to be the Canadian police. The Canadian police in Canada has some of the most rigorous, strongest regulations for craft above 250 grams in the world. You have to have maintenance logs, and you can't fly if there's snow on your propellers, all sorts of crap like that. Yet they themselves, the people who are there to enforce the law, have crashed their drones into aircraft on 2 occasions. And one of those occasions, it was their own helicopter they hit. So it shows that rules don't make safety. It is an attitude of responsibility. It's an attitude of taking responsibility for everybody's safety, including your own. That seems to be missing with the Canadian police. So when rules are just a good way to help give you information you need to stay safe. They're not a crutch. If you use them as a crutch, you end up flying police drones into police helicopters and Cessna 172s. We've proven that, absolutely proven that. Yet we've also proven that in over 10 years, not one single person has died as a result of the recreational use of multi-rotor drones, and there has been no incidents of major property damage. In the meantime, how many people have died in ultralight accidents? How many manned aircraft have had mid-air collisions involving quite significant fatalities for lack of ADS-B? And how many aircraft have been used by bad actors to do bad things like smuggling and all sorts of other stuff. It's it's evidence. If you look at the evidence, we are being unreasonably regulated, massively over-regulated. And these are facts that I'm hoping that when we roll this out to the media, that they'll contact me or whoever, and I'll be able to relate some of the other facts involved in here. The initial message will be short, sharp, concise, and focused on how this affects the American people. But I also would like to get across, because there could be follow-up stories on just how out of control the FAA is. Remember, the FAA empowered Boeing to kill how many hundred people through the MAX 8 problem? So the FAA's neck will be on the line here. And it's good timing from our point of view. People haven't forgotten the MAX 8 debacle. Why should you trust the FAA when they're now recklessly and needlessly massively over-regulating this, one of the safest hobbies on the face of the planet, for no good reason? Yeah, these are things that we will raise with the media at the appropriate time. And interesting, John, remember, if you're going to put videos on YouTube, you'll have to get a 107 and you'll have to put remote ID on your sub-250s. That's another thing. I mean, during the lockdown, quite a number of people posting videos to YouTube using mainly camera drones were approached by the FAA, and they were told that you have to get a Part 107 certification and you must make a video telling other people they need to get Part 107 or we will fine you. And that's still in force. If you monetize your videos, in theory, well, in practice, you have to have a Part 107 because it's no longer purely recreational. And that's the point that Kevin Morris has made many times. So, yeah, the interesting thing about that is, now if you have a channel that's not monetized, and a lot of small channels aren't monetized, and you post videos, YouTube monetizes those videos anyway sometimes. So the FAA may be looking through videos, see a video come up, and an ad comes up before it. How are they to know whether it's because you've monetized it or whether YouTube have just decided to put an ad on there? They don't know. So this is crazy times. Yep, I'd say, John, if you that's true, it's the intention of the flight at the time. But if you have a history of posting videos regularly and monetizing them, they would say that there's clearly an intent to make money out of the flight because you've done it before, regardless of what you claim to be the intent. Remember, regulators are not there to be your friends. They're certainly not there to be your friends. So they will take whatever interpretation suits them at the time. And that's unfortunate. Right, how long have we been going? Just over an hour. It's probably a good time to call it to a halt. But as I say, stay tuned. I will be, first of all, putting a link to that video, which will be kept unlisted because it's not to go out until everyone's had a look and said, yeah, it's great, because undoubtedly people will come back and say, I think you should change this. And I'll be listening to all the feedback. So we get that perfect video, the one chance to make a good impression, the perfect video, and then I'll put that public and I'll send it out to the news media. You guys will also send the links out to every piece of media you know, so they get hundreds of emails from all over the country about this particular issue. They go look at the video, they go, wow, this affects everyone in America. It's a story. And again, the timing will have to be done so that there's nothing else popping up in the news cycle. If there's a major tragedy somewhere, then we'll hold off until there's that pause in the news cycle so that we're not competing with other big events. And we'll take it from there. So I thank, well, 204 people now. I thank every single one of you from the bottom of my heart for the effort you're putting in here. I mean, I can rant and rave and talk ad nauseum, but it's you people, you're making the difference. You're the reason that this will work. And, you know, from my own heart, from my grandkids' heart, for future generations, I thank you all because it's a fantastic thing that you're doing. And let's hope we succeed. And it won't be for lack of trying if we don't. Anyway, thanks, guys. And thanks to all those who donated. I really appreciate it. It's making a big difference. And I will catch you soon. There'll be some more videos coming out soon. Hopefully the weather, it's winter here. It's crap. It's cold. It's raining, windy. But if I get some flying in, I like to make sure that we're not just talking remote ID all the time on the channel, that we remind ourselves why the hobby is such a great thing to enjoy. Thanks for watching, guys. If I can find out how to push the buttons. Oh, thank you, Lewis. Much appreciated. I'll end the stream now. It says, your stream will stop immediately and you will no longer be live. I'm going to kill myself by pressing this button, apparently. Let's see what happens.